Lorenzo Genovese had been collecting rare wines for 20 years, but watching Vivien Cross collapse seconds after tasting the Romane Conti 1945 he'd paid $300,000 for made his blood run cold. The poison had been meant for him. She'd saved his life by doing her job, by tasting first like she always did, and now she was dying on his penthouse floor while he demanded answers no one could give. What did they give you? He wanted to scream at the universe, at the bastards who'd tried to kill him and hurt her instead. But first, he had to make sure she survived. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you want exclusive access to bonus content and early releases, click that join button to become a member. Lorenzo's love for wine had started in his father's study at age 12, watching Stefano Genovese decant a 1961 Chateau Latour with reverence usually reserved for religious ceremonies. His father had explained that great wine required 3 things: exceptional terroir, skilled winemaking, and patience. Like our family business, Stefano had said with a knowing smile. You cannot rush excellence, figlio mio. You build it vintage by vintage, year by year, always thinking generations ahead. Those lessons had stayed with Lorenzo through his father's murder, through his own brutal ascension to power at 31, through the decade of consolidating control and eliminating rivals. Wine had been his meditation, his escape, his connection to the man who'd shaped him. Every bottle in his collection told a story, represented a memory, marked a milestone. He'd promised himself that when he finally found someone worth sharing his life with, he'd open the rarest bottles, the ones he'd been saving for something meaningful. He just never imagined that opening one of those bottles would nearly cost him the woman he loved. Vivien Cross had been authenticating rare wines for New York's elite for 7 years, and she'd learned to spot a forgery from across a room. At 31, she was considered one of the top 5 wine experts in Manhattan, with a client list that read like a who's who of wealth and power. She'd inherited her gift from her father, a legendary sommelier who'd taught her everything before cancer took him when she was 25. Now she carried on his legacy, evaluating collections, authenticating purchases, and occasionally consulting for auction houses like Sotheby's and Christie's. She'd met Lorenzo Genovese 2.5 years ago at a wine auction. He'd been bidding on a Chateau Margaux 1900, and she'd been there evaluating pieces for another client. Their eyes had met across the auction room, and something electric had passed between them. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with black hair showing distinguished threads of silver at the temples, dark eyes that looked almost black in certain light, and the kind of presence that made people instinctively move aside when he walked past. He wore Brioni suits like they were made for him, which they probably were, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed without question. Lorenzo had approached her after the auction, introduced himself with a voice like expensive bourbon, smooth and dark, with just a hint of an Italian accent that made her stomach flip. He'd asked if she'd be willing to authenticate the Margaux he'd just purchased. She'd agreed, of course. It was her job. What she hadn't expected was for that single authentication to turn into a professional relationship that had lasted 2 years, with Lorenzo calling her once or twice a month whenever he acquired something rare for his collection. And she definitely hadn't expected to fall halfway in love with a man she was 90% certain was a mob boss. Vivien wasn't naive. She'd grown up in Manhattan, understood how the city really worked beneath its polished surface. She knew Lorenzo Genovese wasn't just a successful businessman with legitimate import-export operations. She'd seen the way people deferred to him, the bodyguards who materialized whenever he moved through the city, the conversations that stopped when she entered a room. But he'd never been anything but respectful with her, professional, almost charmingly old-fashioned in the way he treated her like something precious, rather than just another employee. The tension between them had been building for 2 years. Every authentication session filled with loaded glances and careful distance. Every conversation dancing around the attraction neither of them acknowledged. Vivien had told herself it was better this way. He was a client. Getting involved would be unprofessional, and possibly dangerous, given what she suspected about his real business. But God, The man made her want to throw professionalism out the window. Tonight was supposed to be routine. Lorenzo had texted her 3 days ago about a significant acquisition. A bottle of 1945 Domaine de la Romane Conti, one of the most prestigious and expensive wines in the world. He wanted her professional opinion before opening it, which was smart, given the price point and the prevalence of sophisticated forgeries in the ultra-rare wine market. Vivien arrived at Lorenzo's penthouse on the Upper East Side at 8 p.m., carrying her authentication kit in a leather case. She wore a black cocktail dress that hit just above the knee, elegant but professional, with her platinum blonde hair styled in loose waves that fell past her shoulders. Her ice blue eyes were carefully made up, and she'd chosen her favorite heels, the red-soled Louboutins that made her feel powerful. Lorenzo's doorman had waved her through with a respectful nod. She'd been here enough times that the building staff knew her on sight. The private elevator opened directly into Lorenzo's penthouse, and she stepped into the foyer with its marble floors and original artwork that probably cost more than most people's houses. "Vivien," Lorenzo's voice came from the living room. "Thank you for coming." She walked into the expansive space with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. And there he was. Lorenzo Genovese in his natural habitat, powerful and magnetic, wearing charcoal dress pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. His dark hair was slightly tousled like he'd been running his hands through it, and those almost black eyes tracked her movement across the room with an intensity that made her breath catch. He was 41, she knew, though he wore the years well. Strong jaw always perfectly shaved, broad shoulders that spoke of someone who stayed in shape despite the demanding schedule of running a criminal empire. He wore a gold Rolex and a family signet ring on his right pinky finger, both subtle displays of wealth and power. There were rumors he'd taken over his family's organization at 31 after his father was killed, that he'd transformed them from street thugs into something more sophisticated, more dangerous. Vivien had never asked. Had maintained their careful professional distance, even while wanting desperately to know everything about him. "Mr. Genovese," she said, using the formal address they'd maintained for 2 years, despite the electricity that crackled between them whenever they were in the same room. "I'm eager to see this Romane Conti. 1945 is legendary. Please, Vivien, after 2 years, I think you can call me Lorenzo," he said. And there was something different in his voice tonight. Something warmer, less guarded. "And yes, the bottle is extraordinary, if it's authentic. That's what I'm here to determine," Vivien said, setting down her kit. "Where is it?" Lorenzo gestured to the dining table where a single bottle sat on a velvet cloth, dramatically spotlit. Even from a distance, Vivien could see it was beautiful. The label aged to perfection, the fill level exactly where it should be for a 75-year-old wine, the capsule showing appropriate oxidation. She approached it like the precious artifact it was, pulling out her loupe, her UV light, her provenance verification tools. Lorenzo stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine with notes of cedar and bergamot. She forced herself to focus on the wine. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to lift the bottle. "Of course." Vivien examined every detail. The glass was hand-blown, appropriate for the era. The label showed the right aging patterns, the correct typography for 1945. The punt at the bottom of the bottle had the expected depth. She used her UV light to check for modern adhesives or tampering. Everything looked perfect. "The exterior authentication is excellent," Vivien said. "But you know I can't confirm without tasting it. There are forgeries sophisticated enough to pass visual inspection." "I know," Lorenzo said. "That's why you're here. Open it." He handed her a professional corkscrew, and Vivien worked carefully, removing the capsule and easing out the cork with practiced precision. It came out perfectly, and she smelled it immediately. Aged cork, slight oxidation, the musty perfume of very old wine. Promising. Lorenzo had already set out 2 crystal glasses, Riedel burgundy stems that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Vivien poured a small amount into the first glass, swirling it gently to release the aromatics. The color was beautiful, brick red with garnet edges, exactly right for a wine this age. She raised the glass to her nose, inhaling deeply. Complex layers of dried roses, forest floor, black tea, leather, and something ineffably elegant that only truly great old Burgundy possessed. Her heart rate kicked up. This smelled authentic. This smelled like the real thing. "Well?" Lorenzo asked, and there was something in his voice she couldn't quite identify. Anticipation? Nervousness? "It smells extraordinary," Vivien admitted, "but I need to taste it to be certain." She always tasted first. It was part of her authentication protocol, a practice her father had taught her. Never let a client drink an expensive wine until you'd verified it was genuine, not just to protect them from fraud, but to protect yourself from liability. She'd tasted hundreds of wines this way over the years, some authentic, some fake, none ever dangerous. Until tonight. Vivien brought the glass to her lips and took a small sip, letting the wine coat her palate. The initial impression was stunning. Everything she'd expected from a legendary bottle. Complex, elegant, with that ethereal quality that made Romanée-Conti the most coveted vineyard in Burgundy. Then she noticed something wrong. A bitter undertone that didn't belong. A chemical edge hiding beneath the wine's natural complexity. Her professional instinct screamed alert, even as her throat was already swallowing the small amount she'd tasted. "Something's wrong," Vivien said, setting down the glass. "There's a taste that shouldn't be." The room tilted, her vision blurred at the edges. Her legs gave out without warning, and she was falling, the marble floor rushing up to meet her. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Lorenzo's face swam into focus above her, his dark eyes wide with horror. "Vivien. Vivien." His voice sounded distant, like she was underwater. "Marco, get the doctor here now. Tell him possible poisoning." Poisoning. The word echoed in Vivien's fading consciousness. Someone had poisoned the wine. Someone had tried to kill Lorenzo, and she'd tasted it first like she always did. She'd saved his life without knowing there was a threat. Her vision went dark. The last thing she heard was Lorenzo's voice, rough with emotion. "Stay with me, Bellissima. Don't you dare die on me. Stay with me." Then nothing. Vivien woke slowly, awareness returning in fragments. Soft sheets beneath her. The steady beep of medical equipment. A hand holding hers with desperate gentleness. She forced her eyes open and found herself in an unfamiliar bedroom. Morning light streaming through gauzy curtains. Lorenzo was slumped in a chair beside the bed, still wearing his clothes from last night, now rumpled and stained. His hair was a mess, his face haggard, and he was holding her hand like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. When her fingers moved slightly, his head snapped up. "Vivien," he breathed, and the raw relief in his voice made her chest ache. "Grazie a Dio, you're awake." "What happened?" Vivien's voice came out rough, her throat burning. "You were poisoned," Lorenzo said flatly. "The wine. Someone put ricin in the Romanée-Conti. You tasted it, and you collapsed. You've been unconscious for 16 hours. Ricin. Vivien's medical knowledge was limited, but she knew ricin was deadly, that there was no real antidote, that survival depended on how much entered your system and how quickly you got treatment. "I'm alive," she said unnecessarily. "Barely," Lorenzo said, and there was fury beneath the relief in his voice. "My doctor said if you'd swallowed much more, if we'd been even 10 minutes slower with treatment, you'd be dead. As it is, you're going to feel like hell for a few days." Vivien became aware of an IV in her arm, of the lingering nausea in her stomach, of how weak her body felt. "The poison was meant for you," she said, understanding clicking into place. You would have drunk it if I hadn't tasted first. Yes, Lorenzo said simply. You saved my life, Vivien. By doing your job, by being cautious and professional like always, you saved my life. Who did this? Vivien asked. Who tried to kill you? Lorenzo's expression went cold, dangerous in a way she'd never seen before. I have a very good idea. The Rossi family. They've been trying to push into my territory for months, and this would be their style. Quiet. Sophisticated. Make it look like an accident. A tragic case of bad wine. The Rossi family, Vivien repeated. She'd heard whispers about them. Another Italian crime family based in Brooklyn. Old rivals of the Genovese organization. They're the ones who put the bottle up for auction? That's what I'm going to find out, Lorenzo said grimly. But first, you need to understand something. They know the assassination attempt failed. They might not know you tasted the wine, might think I survived because I was careful or lucky. But they're going to try again. And if they find out about you, if they realize you're connected to me, you become a target. Fear spiked through Vivien's chest. What are you saying? I'm saying you can't go home. Not until I've handled this threat. You need to stay here, under my protection, where I can keep you safe. Lorenzo's hand tightened on hers. Please, Vivien. I know I don't have the right to ask. I know this wasn't what you signed up for when you agreed to authenticate wines for me, but please, let me protect you. Vivien should refuse. Should insist on going home, on contacting the police, on doing anything other than staying in a mob boss's penthouse while he waged war on a rival crime family. But she looked at Lorenzo's face, at the desperate worry in his dark eyes, at the way he was holding her hand like she was something infinitely precious, and she found herself nodding. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. The relief that flooded Lorenzo's expression was almost painful to witness. Thank you, he said roughly. I swear to you, Vivien, I won't let anything else happen to you. You're under my protection now, and that means something. No one touches you. No one. Over the next 3 days, Vivien recovered in Lorenzo's penthouse while learning exactly how deep his world ran. Men came and went at all hours, reporting to him in rapid Italian that she mostly couldn't follow. She caught words here and there, enough to understand he was coordinating a response to the Rossi family's attack, gathering intelligence, preparing for retaliation. He'd moved her into his guest room, respecting her space even though the tension between them had ratcheted up to nearly unbearable levels. Every time he checked on her, which was frequently, the air felt charged with everything they'd left unsaid for 2 years. On the 3rd day, Vivien felt strong enough to leave the bedroom. She found Lorenzo in his study, standing by the windows overlooking the city, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He'd changed into fresh clothes, black pants, and a gray Henley that clung to his broad shoulders. But he looked exhausted. You should be resting, he said without turning around. I've been resting for 3 days, Vivien said, moving to stand beside him. I'm going stir-crazy. Better stir-crazy than dead, Lorenzo said bluntly. He finally looked at her, and something flickered in his dark eyes. You're wearing my shirt. Vivien glanced down at the oversized dress shirt she'd borrowed from his closet since her cocktail dress wasn't exactly comfortable loungewear. I didn't think you'd mind. All my clothes are at my apartment. I don't mind, Lorenzo said, his voice rougher. You look good in my clothes. You look good in my space. You look good in my life, Vivien, which is a problem because my life is dangerous, and you nearly died because of it. I nearly died doing my job, Vivien corrected. This wasn't your fault, Lorenzo. Wasn't it? He challenged. I bought that wine. I brought it into my home. I asked you to come here, to taste it, to put yourself in danger without even knowing there was a threat. How is that not my fault? Because you didn't poison it, Vivien said firmly. The Rossi family did. They're the ones responsible, not you. The Rossi family is going to pay for what they did, Lorenzo said, and there was cold promise in his voice. I'm going to dismantle their operation piece by piece. I'm going to make sure they understand that trying to kill me is one thing, but hurting an innocent woman who works for me is unforgivable. I'm not innocent, Vivien said quietly. I've known what you are for 2 years, Lorenzo. I've known you're involved in organized crime, that you run an empire built on things that aren't exactly legal. I made a choice to keep working for you anyway. That's not innocence. That's a conscious decision. Lorenzo turned to face her fully, setting down his whiskey glass. Why did you make that choice? You could have walked away after that first authentication, could have refused my calls, but you kept coming back. Why? You know why, Vivien said, her heart pounding. I want to hear you say it. Because I wanted to see you, Vivien admitted, the words tumbling out after 2 years of holding them back. Because every time you called, I got excited. Because I spent 2 years looking forward to our sessions, to the way you looked at me, to the tension between us that neither of us would acknowledge. Because somewhere along the way, I fell for you, Lorenzo. Even knowing what you are. Maybe because of what you are. The air between them felt electric. Lorenzo closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that belied his dangerous reputation. I've wanted you since the moment I saw you at that auction, Lorenzo said, his voice low and intense. But you worked for me, and I have rules about not crossing those lines. I've spent 2 years maintaining professional distance, treating you with respect, not acting on the things I wanted to do every time you walked into a room. And then you almost died in my arms. And I realized rules don't mean a damn thing if you're not alive to protect. What are you saying? Vivien whispered, though she thought she knew. I'm saying I love you, Lorenzo said simply. I'm saying I've been in love with you for longer than I want to admit. I'm saying that watching you collapse, thinking I'd lost you before I ever really had you, was the worst moment of my life. And I'm saying that if you want this, if you want me despite the danger and the darkness and everything that comes with my world, then I'm yours, completely. Vivien's answer was to pull him down and kiss him. It was everything 2 years of tension had promised and more. Lorenzo kissed like he did everything else, with focus and intensity and barely controlled hunger. His hands stayed gentle on her face, even as the kiss deepened, even as Vivien pressed closer and opened her mouth to let him in. She could taste whiskey on his tongue, could feel the slight scrape of stubble against her jaw, could feel the hard planes of his body against her softer curves. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. Tell me to stop, he murmured. Tell me you need more time to recover, that this is too fast, and I'll walk away. I'll go back to keeping my distance until you're ready. Don't you dare, Vivien said fiercely. I've waited 2 years for this. I'm not waiting anymore. Lorenzo made a sound low in his throat and kissed her again. Harder this time, with less restraint. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Vivien could feel the evidence of his want pressing against her hip. She'd never been more certain of anything in her life. Bedroom, she gasped between kisses. Now. You're still recovering. Lorenzo, if you don't take me to bed right now, I'm going to combust. He swept her up into his arms with effortless strength and carried her down the hallway, not to the guest room she'd been using, but to his own bedroom. The space was masculine and sophisticated, all dark wood and expensive linens, with that same stunning view of Central Park. Lorenzo set her down beside the massive bed, his dark eyes searching her face. Last chance to change your mind, Bellissima, because once we do this, I'm not letting you go. That's not who I am. Good, Vivien said, already reaching for the hem of his shirt, because I don't want you to let go. What followed was a revelation. Lorenzo made love with the same intensity he brought to everything else, learning every inch of her body with focused attention, making her gasp and moan and fall apart in his arms. He was demanding but attentive, rough when she needed it, and gentle when she asked. And by the time they finally collapsed together in tangled sheets, Vivien understood that she'd been ruined for anyone else. "Say, Mia," Lorenzo murmured against her hair as they lay intertwined in the aftermath. "You're mine now, Vivien. Mine to protect, mine to love, mine to keep safe from anything that would hurt you." They lay in the darkness for a while, Lorenzo's fingers tracing absent patterns on her bare shoulder, Vivien's head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. It felt surreal, being here with him like this, after 2 years of careful distance and professional boundaries. "Tell me something no one else knows," Vivien said quietly. "Something real." Lorenzo was silent for a long moment, his hand stilling on her skin. "I have nightmares about my father's death," he finally said. "Almost every night. I was there when it happened, watched him bleed out in my arms while his killers escaped. I was 29, still learning the business, not ready to lead. And in those dreams, I'm always too slow, always too weak, always failing to save him." Vivien lifted her head to look at him, seeing vulnerability in those dark eyes that he never showed the world. "You were just a kid thrust into impossible circumstances. That wasn't failure, Lorenzo. That was survival." "Sometimes survival and failure feel like the same thing," Lorenzo said. "I survived. I took over. I became what the family needed. But I've spent 12 years wondering if I'm doing it right. If he'd be proud, if I'm honoring his legacy or destroying it." "He'd be proud," Vivien said with certainty. "You've built something sophisticated, something that lasts. You protect your people. You have principles, even if they're not conventional ones. That's legacy, Lorenzo." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You see the best in me, Bellissima, even the parts I'm not sure deserve it." "Possessive," Vivien said, but she was smiling. "When it comes to you? Absolutely," Lorenzo confirmed. He propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "I need you to understand what this means. You're not just in my bed now. You're in my life. My enemies will see you as a weakness, a way to get to me. The Rossi family especially. This makes you a target." "Then we deal with that together," Vivien said. "I'm not some delicate flower who needs to be locked in a tower, Lorenzo. I know how to take care of myself." "I know you do," Lorenzo said, "but let me take care of you anyway. Let me show you what it means to have someone in your corner who'd burn down the world before letting anyone hurt you." "That's terrifying and romantic in equal measure," Vivien said. "Welcome to my world, Bellissima." Over the next month, Vivien's life transformed. She moved into Lorenzo's penthouse officially, not just as a temporary guest, but as his partner, his lover, the woman who'd somehow captured the heart of New York's most dangerous man. Her wine authentication business continued, but now with the implicit protection of the Genovese name, which opened doors that had previously been closed and made certain clients suddenly very eager to work with her. Lorenzo was attentive and possessive in equal measure, always wanting to know where she was, always making sure she had security when she left the penthouse. Vivien found she didn't mind. After years of being alone, of being independent out of necessity rather than choice, having someone care so deeply about her safety felt like a gift. Their first official date was 3 weeks after that night. Lorenzo took her to his wine cellar beneath one of his legitimate businesses, a temperature-controlled vault that held millions of dollars worth of rare bottles. "This is incredible," Vivien breathed, walking between rows of wines she'd only ever dreamed of tasting. "Some of these bottles are museum pieces." "I want you to manage this collection," Lorenzo said. "Not just authenticate, but curate. Buy for me. Sell what doesn't fit. Build something extraordinary." "I trust your expertise," And I want you to have a role in my life beyond just being my lover." "You're serious?" Vivien asked. "Completely. Name your price." "I don't want your money," Vivien said, "but I want access. I want to create the finest private wine collection in New York. Can you handle that?" "Bellissima. I can give you anything you want," Lorenzo said, pulling her close. "Anything except safety from my world. That's the one thing I can't promise." "Then promise me you'll always be honest," Vivien said. "Don't hide things from me to protect me. Treat me like a partner, not a fragile thing to be sheltered." "I can do that," Lorenzo agreed. He kissed her deeply, pressing her back against a wine rack with 6-figure bottles on either side. "Though right now, all I want to do is take you against this rack and make you scream my name." "In the wine cellar?" Vivien asked, even as heat pooled low in her belly. "Especially in the wine cellar," Lorenzo said, already sliding his hand under her skirt. "I want to make love to you surrounded by millions of dollars of wine. Want to hear you moan while you're pressed against bottles worth more than most people make in a year." "That's obscene," Vivien gasped as his fingers found her center. "That's us," Lorenzo said, and proceeded to make good on his promise. Their second date was at a charity gala in Manhattan, Vivien wearing a stunning red gown that Lorenzo had bought her, his hand possessive on her lower back as they moved through the crowd. She saw the way people looked at them, the speculation in their eyes. Lorenzo Genovese's new woman, the sommelier who'd somehow captured his attention. "They're all wondering who you are," Lorenzo murmured in her ear. "They're wondering what makes you special enough to be on my arm." "And what would you tell them?" Vivien asked. "That you're the woman who saved my life, the woman who sees all of me and loves me anyway, the woman I'm going to marry as soon as she'll have me." Vivien nearly tripped over her own feet. "What?" "Too soon?" Lorenzo asked, amused. "We've known each other 2 years, Bellissima. I've wanted you the entire time. Now that I have you, I'm not letting go. So yes, I'm going to marry you, eventually, when you're ready." "You're insane," Vivien said, but her heart was racing with excitement rather than fear. "About you? Absolutely." But their happiness was interrupted 2 days later when the Rossi family made their second move. Vivien was at her small office in Tribeca, examining a collection a new client wanted authenticated, when the door burst open and 3 men rushed in. She recognized the threat immediately, her hand going to the panic button Lorenzo had installed under her desk. But before she could press it, one of the men grabbed her, yanking her away from the desk. "Vivien Cross," the man said. "Don Genovese's pretty little wine expert. You're coming with us." "Like hell I am," Vivien said, and drove her knee up into his groin with all her strength. The man doubled over with a curse, and Vivien ran for the door. She almost made it before another attacker grabbed her from behind. She fought, screaming, scratching, using every self-defense technique she'd learned growing up in New York. She heard gunfire, felt the man holding her jerk and fall, taking her down with him. Then Lorenzo's men were there, his security team that had been watching her building, more gunfire. Vivien covered her head and tried to make herself small. Someone was shouting in Italian. Glass shattered. Then strong hands were pulling her up, and she was looking into Marco's face, Lorenzo's right-hand man. "Are you hurt?" Marco demanded. "No, I'm okay, Vivien looked down and saw blood on her arm, a cut from broken glass but nothing serious. "Where's Lorenzo?" "On his way. Come on, we need to get you out of here." They hustled her out through the back entrance to a waiting SUV. Vivien's heart was pounding, adrenaline making her shake. They'd tried to take her. The Rossi family had tried to kidnap her to get to Lorenzo. Lorenzo was waiting at the penthouse when they arrived, and the fury on his face was terrifying. But when he saw her, when he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, the fury melted into desperate relief. "Did they hurt you?" he demanded, holding her at arm's length to examine her for injuries. Marco said there was blood. "Just a cut from glass," Vivien assured him. "I'm okay, Lorenzo," Your men got there in time. They shouldn't have gotten close enough to try, Lorenzo said darkly. This ends now. The Rossi family wants war. They'll get war. What are you going to do? Vivien asked, though she was afraid she already knew. What I should have done weeks ago. Eliminate the threat completely. Lorenzo cupped her face gently despite the violence in his voice. They tried to poison me and nearly killed you. Then they tried to kidnap you from your own office. They're escalating, which means I need to end this before they get another chance. Be careful, Vivien whispered. I just found you. I'm not ready to lose you. You're not going to lose me, Lorenzo promised. I've been doing this for 20 years, Bellissima. The Rossi family is old and weak. They're about to learn what happens when you come after what's mine. He left that night with 20 of his best men. Vivien paced the penthouse like a caged animal, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but worry. Marco stayed with her, standing guard even though the penthouse security was impenetrable. He'll be fine, Marco said after midnight when Vivien had worn a path in the expensive rug. I've been with Lorenzo since we were teenagers. He doesn't take unnecessary risks. This whole thing is an unnecessary risk, Vivien said. He's going to war with another family because of me. He's going to war because they tried to kill him, Marco corrected. You're just the reason he's ending it rather than letting it drag out. Before you, he might have been content with a stalemate. Now he has something to protect, someone to come home to. That makes him more dangerous, not less. Vivien wanted to ask more, but her phone buzzed. Lorenzo. One word. Done. He came home at 4 a.m., blood on his knuckles but otherwise unharmed. Vivien threw herself into his arms and he caught her, holding her tight while she shook with relief. It's over, Lorenzo said into her hair. Don Carlo Rossi is dead. His lieutenants are scattered. The family will collapse within a week. You're safe, Vivien. No one else is coming after you. Did you... Vivien couldn't finish the question. Kill him myself? Yes. Lorenzo pulled back to look at her. Does that scare you? Does knowing I'm capable of that change how you feel? Vivien thought about it honestly. Lorenzo had killed a man tonight. Had probably killed several men. He'd gone to war for her, eliminated threats, done terrible things to keep her safe. And she should be horrified, should be running for the door and never looking back. Instead, she pulled him down for a fierce kiss. Thank you, she whispered against his mouth. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for being someone who'd burn the world down before letting anyone hurt me. Always, Lorenzo promised. For the rest of my life, Bellissima. You're mine, and I protect what's mine. They made love that night with desperate intensity, reaffirming they were both alive, both safe, both together. And when Vivien fell asleep in Lorenzo's arms, she felt safer than she ever had in her life. 2 months after the poisoning, Lorenzo took Vivien back to Sotheby's auction house where they'd first met. She was confused when he insisted they attend what seemed like a routine wine auction. Even more confused when he bid $200,000 on a lot she knew was overpriced. Why did you buy that? Vivien asked as they moved to the private viewing room where high-value purchases could be examined before taking possession. I didn't buy the wine, Lorenzo said. I bought the moment. Come here. He led her to the table where his purchase sat displayed on velvet. But when Vivien looked closer, she saw the bottle wasn't wine at all. It was a prop, and inside it, nestled where wine should be, was a ring box. Lorenzo, Vivien breathed. He opened the box to reveal a ring that took her breath away. A ruby the color of fine wine, surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like stars. It was unusual, sophisticated, and absolutely perfect. 2.5 years ago, I saw you in this building, Lorenzo said, taking her hands. You were authenticating a Margot, and you had this look of complete concentration on your face, and I thought I'd never seen anything more beautiful. I hired you that night because I needed an excuse to see you again. I kept hiring you because every time I saw you, I fell a little more in love. Then you almost died, Lorenzo continued, his voice rough with emotion, and I realized I'd wasted 2 years being professional, being respectful, being careful, when what I should have been doing was showing you exactly how much you meant to me. So I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not being careful. I'm asking you right here, in the place where we met, to marry me. Vivien Cross, you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. You're brilliant and strong, and you see all of me, the good and the terrible, and you love me anyway. You saved my life by being cautious and thorough. Now I'm asking you to save it again by choosing to spend yours with me. Marry me, Bellissima. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life keeping you safe and making you happy. Vivien was crying, mascara definitely running, and she didn't care. Yes, she said. Yes, of course, yes. I love you so much, Lorenzo. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her deeply, right there in the private viewing room of Sotheby's, probably scandalizing the staff who were discreetly watching. When they broke apart, Vivien was laughing through her tears. A fake wine bottle with a ring inside, she said. That's either the most romantic or most ridiculous proposal I've ever heard of. It's us, Lorenzo said with a smile. Wine brought us together. Wine nearly killed us both. And now wine is marking the beginning of our future. It's perfect. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Tuscany, Italy, where Lorenzo's family had originated. Vivien wore a champagne-colored dress that made her look like an angel, her platinum blonde hair styled in elegant waves, her ice-blue eyes bright with happiness. Lorenzo wore a custom tuxedo and couldn't stop staring at his bride like she was a miracle he couldn't quite believe was real. His entire organization was there, along with Vivien's small circle of friends from the wine world. The ceremony was in Italian and English, and when Lorenzo said his vows, several people openly cried. You walked into my life evaluating wine, Lorenzo said, and you changed everything. You made me believe in love again, made me want something beyond power and control. You gave me a future worth living for. You are my heart, mio amore, my partner, my equal, my everything. Ti amo per sempre. I love you forever. You saw me when I was just doing my job, Vivien said through tears. And you made me feel like I was worth seeing. You protected me, cherished me, loved me even when it was dangerous. You gave me a home, a family, a life I never knew I wanted. You are my strength, my safety, my great love. I choose you, Lorenzo, today and every day for the rest of our lives. When they kissed as husband and wife, the cheering could probably be heard in the next vineyard over. Their honeymoon was 2 weeks touring wine regions across Europe, visiting historic vineyards and tasting wines that most people only dreamed about. Lorenzo was attentive and romantic, constantly surprising her with small gestures, always making sure she was happy. And Vivien had never been more content. 2 years after the poisoning, Vivien stood in the wine cellar of the Upper East Side mansion she now shared with Lorenzo, examining a new acquisition for their collection. They'd built something extraordinary together, one of the finest private wine collections in North America, with Vivien's expertise and Lorenzo's resources combining to create something truly special. Her hand rested unconsciously on her growing belly, 6 months pregnant with their first child. A daughter, they'd learned last week, though Lorenzo had already known somehow. Genovese men always have daughters first, he'd said with such certainty that Vivien had laughed. It's tradition, the universe's way of keeping us humble. They'd argued playfully about names for weeks. Lorenzo wanted Stefania, after his father. Vivien preferred Aurora, after the goddess of dawn, new beginnings. They'd eventually compromised on Stefania Aurora Genovese, a name that honored the past while looking toward the future. The pregnancy had been unexpected but welcome, a natural evolution of the life they'd built together. Lorenzo had become impossibly more protective, hovering and worrying in ways that were both endearing and occasionally suffocating. But Vivien understood. He'd lost so much in his life. The thought of losing her or their daughter was unbearable to him. "You're supposed to be resting," Lorenzo said from the cellar doorway, though his tone was fond rather than scolding. He'd been saying that a lot lately. "I'm examining wine, not running a marathon," Vivien said, but she moved toward him anyway, letting him pull her close in that careful way he'd adopted since learning about the baby. "Besides, our daughter needs to learn the family business early. Our daughter is going to be spoiled beyond reason," Lorenzo said, his hand joining hers on her belly, "and protected like the crown jewels, and hopefully won't inherit my temper or your stubbornness." "She's definitely inheriting my stubbornness," Vivien said. "Someone needs to keep you in line." But the thing she was most proud of wasn't the collection itself. It was what they'd built together. A life, a partnership, a love that had survived poisoning and kidnapping attempts and the darkness of Lorenzo's world. The door to the cellar opened, and Lorenzo appeared, still wearing his suit from whatever business he'd handled that day. He smiled when he saw her, that special smile he reserved just for her, and crossed the space to pull her into his arms. "Find anything interesting?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "A 1947 Cheval Blanc that I think is authentic," Vivien said, "but I need to taste it to be certain." "Then let's taste it together," Lorenzo said. "But this time, I taste first." It had become their ritual. Every wine they opened, Lorenzo tasted first, his way of making sure nothing ever threatened her again. Vivien had argued at first, but she'd come to understand it was his way of showing love, of protecting her, of making sure history never repeated. They opened the bottle together, Lorenzo pouring 2 glasses with practiced ease. He tasted first, his sophisticated palate immediately identifying notes and characteristics. Then Vivien tasted, her professional expertise confirming authenticity. "It's real," she said, "and it's magnificent." "Not as magnificent as you," Lorenzo said, pulling her close. "You know I love you, right? Every single day, more than the day before." "I know," Vivien said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "I love you too, my dangerous, protective, wine-collecting mobster husband." "Your husband who would do anything for you," Lorenzo corrected. "Who'd burn down every wine collection in the world if it meant keeping you safe." "Good thing you don't have to," Vivien said, "because I'm exactly where I want to be. With you, surrounded by incredible wine, living a life I never imagined." "Sometimes the best things come from the worst moments," Lorenzo said thoughtfully. "I bought that Romane Conti to celebrate a business success. Instead, it nearly killed us both. But it also brought us together, forced us to stop pretending there wasn't something between us, made us face what we'd been dancing around for 2 years. "So you're saying getting poisoned was good for us?" Vivien asked, amused. "I'm saying that even terrible things can lead to extraordinary outcomes. You saved my life that night, and in doing so, you gave me a reason to really live. That's the best gift anyone's ever given me." Vivien set down her wine glass and wrapped her arms around Lorenzo's neck. "Then I guess we're even, because you saved me right back. Gave me a home, a family, a love I didn't think I'd ever find. You saw me, Lorenzo. Really saw me. And you chose me anyway." "I'll choose you every time, Bellissima," Lorenzo promised. "In this life and whatever comes after. You're it for me. My beginning and my end. My greatest risk and my biggest reward. My love." They stood there in the wine cellar, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of rare vintages, and kissed like they had all the time in the world. Because they did. They'd survived poisoning and war, and the darkness of Lorenzo's world. They'd built something beautiful from violence and fear. They'd found love in the most unlikely of places. And every time they opened a bottle of wine, they remembered that night. The night Vivien tasted poison and saved Lorenzo's life without knowing it. The night everything changed. The night they stopped pretending and started building a future together. Some people said wine was just fermented grapes, a product of chemistry and time. But Vivien knew better. Wine was history in a bottle, romance and tragedy, celebration and sorrow. Wine had brought her to Lorenzo. Wine had nearly killed them both. And wine had marked every important moment of their relationship since. It seemed fitting, then, that their love story was written in vintages and tastings, in authentication sessions that became foreplay, in cellars where they made love surrounded by liquid history. They'd turned something deadly into something beautiful, and that was its own kind of magic. Lorenzo pulled back enough to look at her, his dark eyes soft with love. Ti amo, mia moglie. Ti amo più della mia vita. I love you, my husband. I love you more than life. And in the quiet of their wine cellar, surrounded by treasures and memories, they opened another bottle and toasted to the future, to love that survived poison, to partnerships built on trust, to the extraordinary life they'd created together, one glass at a time. Have you ever had someone save your life without knowing it? Have you ever found love in an unexpected place? Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of survival, protection, and unexpected love, subscribe to our channel for more dark romance tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. And if you want exclusive bonus content, extended scenes, and early access, click that join button to become a channel member. Your support helps us create more content like this. Thank you for being part of our community.